Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lipstick Chat with Ebony Fox. I'm so glad to have you here with me. We are going to move into a new journey of healing after narcissistic abuse. As I move away from my old life and embrace my new life, I realized my time with the narcissist gave me this new life. I have boundaries now, I have discernment, and I have a love of self. I spend time with me, acknowledging my lessons and looking back on my life, walking backwards through each relationship that I had, I now recognize how God brought me through a spiritual journey. Let me share my journeys with you. I met my last husband online. He was a nice guy. He was one of those guys who drove a nice car, but probably didn't have very much for himself. As I look back on it, I can now see how I was in that frame of mind of helping to build him to become his greatest self. Yeah, that was the first signal, because you really can't change people. I saw something in him that I don't think he saw in himself. We dated for years, actually, probably like 4 or 5 before things turned serious. But during that time, there were also opportunity, or should I say, spiritual awakenings that God was showing me signs that this probably was not the man that He intended for me to be with. And I know my story takes a turn, but it is very important to recognize that I probably would not be where I am today if it were not for God. I remember one time going to the gym with this man, and he came up to me in the gym and told me that I needed to leave. And I was wondering why. And he told me that some other woman was there and that I couldn't be there while she was there. Well, I was young and I was kind of defiant. And I'm like, it's a public gym. And why should I leave if there's a problem? She should be the one to leave. He was terrified. And at that time, I didn't really know what he had done, but I knew he wanted me out of that gym. I don't know if he thought that she was going to threaten me, or I have no idea what was going on. Eventually, let's just say I left. That was one sign. And then I remembered one day we went to, I guess you would call it a park, a theme park. And we hung out there all day and we came back home, and he drove a sort of gold colored truck. And when we pulled into the driveway of his home, we noticed that all his tires were flat. Yes, that was sign number 2. Maybe the third strike was one time we went out to dinner and we came back, and the top of the truck it was like someone had took a key and had scratched up the entire hood of the truck. At this particular point, I told him, whatever you have going on, whatever's happening in your life, you need to address it and you need to fix it. And don't come back to see me until it is fixed. Needless to say, whatever it was, he fixed it. We wound up getting engaged. We moved in together. And at some point, he would travel for work. And we had decided that we were going to get married maybe a year or two after we had moved in together. And I noticed that when he would come back from his trips, he would always look thinner. And he would tell me that he was exercising and doing a lot of walking in order to lose weight, for the wedding. So I took him at his word. So we went to Las Vegas. We had a wedding. I invited friends and whatnot. They flew out to Vegas. We had a great time. My mom was there. My aunt was there. Just, various family members. And the wedding night was a problem for him. And he couldn't understand why. And I couldn't understand why either. Now, needless to say, we had been celibate until this wedding night. So performance issues weren't noticed until the actual wedding night. We came back from Las Vegas and I told him he needed to go see a doctor. And he had gotten a notice from his primary care physician that he had blood in his urine. So I thought maybe this is something that's going on. He needs to go get checked out. He went to the doctor. He had a CT scan and a couple of other tests and found out that he had kidney cancer. He had a mass on one of his kidneys. So they scheduled him for surgery and they removed one of his kidneys. But that was only the beginning. Later, more test results came back and I found out that he had multiple myeloma. For those of you who don't know, it's a blood disease that has no cure. It can be maintained, they can keep you healthy for so long, but there is no definitive cure for multiple myeloma. So when he came home to tell me that news, he said to me, it's only been a few days. If you want to get a annulment of the marriage, we can do that. Well, I didn't get married to him because of sex, and I didn't want that to be the reason that we wound up getting a divorce. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I know you guys are not going to believe it, but I could hear a voice whisper to me that I needed to stay with him because he did not need to go through this alone. So I told him, no, I married you for better or worse, and I'm going to stick it out with you. So he began chemo treatments. Have you ever said you're never going to do something or you can't picture yourself ever going through something with someone and then you find yourself smack dab in the middle of it? Well, that was me. I signed up for something and I was not aware how hard it was going to be. I don't even think I was aware of what the ending would be. But needless to say, I stuck it out with him and we went through so many different issues. Meds that made him angry, lack of intimacy, which made him angry. I know that he was wondering why me. And I couldn't help him with that reason. I just knew that I was supposed to be there. I mean, there were times that we were in the hospital and I didn't know if he was going to be leaving the hospital. I remember days that he would be home and he would sit on the sofa and say he was tired. I remember days of him telling me that he was trying to stay for me because he didn't want to leave me here in this world by myself. I remember sitting upstairs in our bonus room talking and him telling me that he had seen one of his family members coming up the stairs. This family member was deceased, but she was coming for him. And he was looking up in the corner of the room and he told her he wasn't ready. And then he didn't see her anymore. These were things that I never thought I would experience, but I did. I wound up talking to my mother's cousin who told me that when a person is finally tired and ready to go, they will tell you so. And through all the drama that I went through, I remember in the end, I had to put him in hospice. And I remember him laying in the hospice bed thinking he was only going to be there for a day or two and then he would go home. And I told him that we weren't going home and I could see that he was heartbroken. I could see he was heartbroken because I believe that he wanted to live his last days at the house. But he was getting up in the middle of the night and not knowing where he was and not knowing what was going on. And I literally couldn't handle it by myself and go to work every day. I stuck it out because I knew that God wanted me to. I knew that I was supposed to be there and see him through this to the very end. I remember sitting in the nursing home and him putting his arms around my waist and looking up at me and telling me, I'm ready now. Oh, that scared me. That scared me because I knew that I was about to be alone. I wondered if that was all a part of codependency, if that was fear, was I being selfish? I don't know, I can't tell you. But I can tell you that I was watching this man deteriorate from a 225-pound, 6'1" muscle built man to a person who was probably 100 pounds. I didn't know when or where or how, but when it did happen, I was happy for him because he was suffering. Myeloma is painful because it starts to destroy the bones. I wondered if I had done all the right things. I wondered if I had been there enough. I wondered if I had done everything that he wanted me to do. I began to realize that I had done what God wanted me to do. I had sat there with him through thick and thin and been by his side and in multiple hospitals. And I thought, is this the beginning? Is this the beginning of me recognizing how God takes care of his children? How wonderful it would be to have that kind of support until the very end. To take a look in the mirror at myself and ask myself, did I have anybody that would be there for me like that? As I have read through the Bible and the book of John, I thought, I am Simon. You remember when Jesus changed Simon's name to Peter because Simon was the violent and undependable person and Peter was the rock? But there was a time when Jesus changed his name back to Peter. That's when I began to realize that we are all Simons and we are all Peters. That we all sin and fall short because, as you know, Peter then denied Jesus as time went on and then felt guilty because he didn't know if Jesus would forgive him. Just as I didn't know if I had done all the right things in the right timing, but I now realize that no matter what I did and do in this life, that I will always be a Simon and a Peter, but I will always be forgiven as long as I believe and I know that Jesus exists in order to ensure that we are forgiven for our sins. I know that this man I was married to brought me to the beginning of a spiritual walk that I was not aware I would be on. I've never seen anybody die, and I thought I would be devastated, but instead I was in awe. I couldn't believe that I was happy that he was out of pain. I remember just being exhausted at the end of this road. But I also know that it brought me spiritually to a place where I didn't recognize how much God looks at his children and forgives us for all of our mistakes. So just let me say to you that sometimes a narcissist can bring you to a place, if you take the time to think about it, where you look back on your life and you try to figure out, how did I get here? And if you look at each one of your relationships, you may see that narcissist. And if you take the time to become one with your spiritual leader, love, God, Jesus, you will come to that point where you will recognize what you need to do. Until the next episode, please come back, like, and subscribe to Ebony Fox at Lipstick Chat.